Hello my friends, I'm going to explain what a harmonic chart is and how to interpret the harmonic chart. This is part one. I'm going to be making additional continuations of this tutorial video in the future. First of all, before I explain what a harmonic chart is, why do we have a harmonic chart? The reason we have a harmonic chart is because we believe that minor aspects are important. Minor aspects are aspects such as fifths of a circle. Here we have the birth chart of Buddy Holly. And in Buddy Holly's chart, I want to focus on just the Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus. They are fifths of a circle from each other. Venus and Jupiter are about 72 degrees, which is 1/5. Jupiter and Uranus are about 144 degrees, which is 2/5. And Venus and Uranus are also about 144 degrees, actually closer to 145 degrees, which is also 2/5, with about a 1 degree orb. 144 would be exact. So they're all close to being fifths of a circle apart. And the idea is that these other fractions, such as fifths or sevenths or ninths, 11ths, 13ths, all kinds of fractions are important, and they've been overlooked. That's the assumption. If you think that is true, then number one, you want to know about these aspects. Number two, it would be nice to see a diagram or a visualization of aspects that are related to each other. For example, as you might suspect, the 1/5 and 2/5 aspects are similar in meaning, because intuitively you can think of it as you've divided the circle into fifths, and whether you take 1/5 or 2/5 of the circle is less important than the fact you've divided the pie into 5 pieces, so to speak. And whether you take 1 piece of the pie or 2 pieces of the pie is less important than the fundamental fact that you've divided the circle into 5 pieces. So these are similar in meaning, not identical, but 5 gives play. You don't want to humdrum life. You want to play. You want to step outside the box. It's often creative. So if this is true, Buddy Holly, who's one of the first rock and roll musicians in the early days of rock and roll, credited with having helped develop or invent rock and roll, or initial stages of developing that kind of music. If this is true, he's wanting his Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus to play. So Venus and Uranus are rhythm and excitability, and Venus, Jupiter is happy and expressive, and Jupiter, Uranus is enthusiastic. So he wants some kind of spontaneous, joyous, optimistic playfulness, and his music is very much like that. It's very light. It's fun. He changes his tone quality of his voice in strange ways. He has these little hiccup sounds that are funny. It's light, happy, celebration type music, and I believe it's this pattern that does it. The Venus, Jupiter, Uranus. And what I would like to know is, what are the orbs? I can't look at this chart wheel and tell, because my brain is not smart enough to look at 4 Libra and 16 and almost 16 degrees Sagittarius and tell what the orbs are at a glance. I'd have to sit and play with the numbers and figure it out, and 9 Taurus, and I would like a visual so I can see what's strong and what's weaker, and is it almost out of orb. I want to know that, and the harmonic chart does that for me. That's what the harmonic chart does. So that's the reason we have a harmonic chart, and it does a lot more than that, which I'm going to introduce you to in a moment. But that's the first idea. So, before we go any further, let me talk about this idea of minor aspects. Because if you don't think minor aspects are important, then you're not interested in harmonic charts, at least not for the reason that I use them, which is to look at these so-called minor aspects. So just to give you an idea of some of the history behind minor aspects, Johannes Kepler is credited with introducing minor aspects, is what the historians say. He has a booklet that he wrote it was published in the year 1601, called On the More Certain Fundamentals of Astrology, and in that booklet he mentions minor aspects. Here's a website you can go to, or just Google, and you'll find this booklet that he wrote, and he periodically mentions minor aspects like quintiles and other aspects beyond the basic 5. Any aspect that's not a conjunction, opposition, square, trine, or sextile, those 5 were laid down over 2,000 years ago as being important, but it wasn't until around the year 1600, is what the historians tell us, that we start seeing evidence of this alternative idea that there could be more aspects than the ones that were mentioned and used by so many astrologers for so long. Then after Kepler comes up with this idea of minor aspects, other people say, oh, that's interesting, I think I'll play around with it. So, for example, William Lilly, the very influential horary astrologer, influential even to this day, many people are highly influenced by his ideas. He experimented with quintiles. You'll see mention of it in his classic book, Christian Astrology, Book 3, page 513 in the version published by the Astrology Center of America. Now, so this idea of minor aspects, Kepler comes up with the idea. Some people play around with it, but it gets a big boost in the 1970s. Well, not so much the 80s. It was more in the 60s and 70s that John Addy, a British astrologer, does a lot of research, writes some excellent books and articles, and gets this idea of minor aspects popularized and works out more of the details of it in a system that he calls harmonic astrology. Then this interest sort of fades out, and around the 1990s into the 2000s, a few astrologers continue using it, such as myself. And my variation of harmonic astrology, which uses a lot of specific ideas not used by John Addy, I now call vibrational astrology. And in vibrational astrology, as with the general concepts laid out by Addy, harmonic charts are very important. And note that some astrologers, such as Robert Zoller and John Frawley, have criticized the use of minor aspects. So that gives you some general background to the idea. Okay. Now that we've established that, if you're one of these people who's either open to the idea of minor aspects or you've started using them and you're seeing that they're important, the harmonic chart will help you see more clearly what's going on. And to review some of the ideas I started presenting, there's three major theoretical ideas behind this. One is that an aspect is a fraction of a circle. The reason why a trine is important is because it's 1/3 of a circle. A square is 1/4, and we can use other fractions, 1/5 and 2/5, and we can give them names like quintile and biquintile, but the names are not that important. The main point is that you have fractions of a circle, and the meaning of an aspect is in the fraction. 4 motivates and drives. 3 is harmonious and pleasant. That we know is well established in astrology. 5 gives creativity and play. So you look at what that does. 2 is going to give polarity, often sharing with others. So the biquintile is more interested in playing with others than the quintile. But the numerator is subtle compared to the denominator. As I mentioned before, the big deal is whether you've divided the circle into 5 pieces. Whether you take 1 piece or 2 is not as important. So as I say here in point C, the denominator is more important than the numerator. Another example is whether you have a 1/8 or a 3/8 aspect is not as important as the fact that you've divided the circle into eighths and you've got the impact of 8, which I'll talk about in future videos. So we want to see, here's what we want, and the harmonic chart is going to do it. We want to see planets that are in what's called the same harmonic. Harmonic is another word for denominator. So let's go back to Buddy Holly's natal chart. These fifths, we call it fifth harmonic. Harmonic just means denominator, because an aspect is a fraction of a circle. We want some kind of diagram to show us that Venus and Jupiter and Uranus are in fifth harmonic to each other, and we want to see the orbs more clearly. And the harmonic chart will do that. And it will do a lot more. We'll talk about all these other things out here in a minute that the harmonic chart will also show us. But right now, taking one step at a time, it's going to show us this very clearly. And the way it does it, the harmonic chart will turn them into conjunctions. It'll take all the distances between the planets, multiply them by 5. It'll stretch this 72 degrees to be 5 times bigger and turn it into 360, or in other words, 0. It'll take the 2/5, stretch it 5 times, and so 5 times 2/5 equals 2, which becomes 2 circles. It comes back around again, turns it into conjunction. So it magically turns all these fifths into conjunctions, and we'll see the orbs. because if they're closer together as conjunctions in the fifth harmonic chart, that chart where we spread all the angles between all the planets by 5 is called a harmonic chart. When we multiply by 5, we get the fifth harmonic chart. The orbs will show up as well, and we'll see the orbs. So we'll have a nice picture of it, and we'll see the orbs. Let me show you that. There's the harmonic chart. When you calculate the fifth harmonic chart for Buddy Holly, you'll see Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus all together. You'll see Jupiter and Uranus 2 degrees apart, Venus and Jupiter 3 degrees apart, and Venus and Uranus 5 degrees apart, and that's proportionate to the orbs. The Jupiter-Uranus aspect is the one with the smallest orb. So it's maintained the concept of the orbs. I'll explain some more details about this in a minute, but right now I just want to emphasize that we can now see that they're in fifth harmonic in a nice visual, and we can see how relatively close they are to each other. Okay, and it's going to tell us a lot more. We'll get to the rest of this in a minute. But I just want to emphasize that we now see these fifths in a nice diagram where we can see what the orbs are, because I can subtract 18 minus 16, and I know I've got 2, much easier than trying to look at the natal chart. So you can see the orbs more clearly. Now, one more thing about these orbs, to make this a little clearer. The orb in the harmonic chart is proportionally larger than in the natal chart. So in the fifth harmonic chart, the orbs are 5 times bigger. That orb of the quintile of Venus and Jupiter in the natal chart is 34 minutes. You can go back and look at his natal chart and calculate that out, and you'll see it's 34 minutes. I'm not going to bother with that. It's just tedious arithmetic. It's a little over half a degree. The orb of the conjunction turns that 1/5 aspect into a conjunction is going to be 5 times bigger. And here I've done the arithmetic. 34 minutes times 5 is 2 degrees 50 minutes. The actual orb must be slightly larger than 34 minutes because more precisely it's 2 degrees 51 minutes. So here I've done the arithmetic on the orbs. The Venus 2/5 Uranus orb is 55 minutes, almost a degree. Multiply that by 5, you get 4 degrees 35 minutes, which is rounded off more precisely, is 4 degrees 37 minutes. And if you look at these orbs, I'll just give you one example. The Venus-Jupiter is 2 degrees 51 minutes. If I add 2 degrees 51 minutes to 18 Libra 35, I get 21 Libra 26. So there it is. So the orbs are relatively the same, and this leads to a marvelous, fantastic, exciting result, which I give in the last paragraph here, that all harmonic charts have the same orbs. This makes life easy, because whether I do the 5th harmonic chart, or the 7th harmonic chart, or the 9th, or the 11th, or the 13th, or any harmonic chart, all the way up into the hundreds, my orbs are the same. In arithmetic, we call this scaling. They're scaled. So anyway, the bottom line is, we use the same orbs, and the orb that I use and is in the range of what Addie also used. I used a 16-degree orb for conjunctions. Now that sounds like a lot, but remember, these orbs have been multiplied by 5 times the natal charts. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. Bottom line is, you use a 16-degree orb for conjunctions. So is this Venus-Jupiter-Uranus pattern, they're all connected by fifths, is it strong? You tell me, based on what I told you. Quiz time. Is that a strong pattern? Yes or no? If you said yes, you got it right. It is a strong pattern because it spreads 5 degrees. 5 is, about a third or a little less than a third of 16. It's really very much within orb, so it's a strong pattern, which confirms what we see when we look at it. They're all less than a degree orb, which sounds strong. It is strong. But this tells us more precisely exactly how strong it is. They're all within 5 degrees of the allowable 16-degree orb. So we have this marvelous result that all harmonic charts have the same orbs, and all we have to do is look at planets conjunct each other, and they're in that harmonic. Well, almost that easy. There's a few wrinkles in this. One thing, this is not a big wrinkle, but it's a concern, and then there's a bigger concern, is that we don't know if it's 1/5 or 2/5, right? It's taken the 1/5 and 2/5, put them all together. Well, that's not critically important because the numerator is not as important as the denominator. But, the numerator is not completely unimportant, so it would be nice to know what the numerator is. That's one problem with harmonic charts. But there's even a bigger issue, which is this. When the planets are conjunct, they're in the fifth harmonic, or any harmonic that has a same least common denominator. Do you remember that phrase from elementary school, if you didn't like numbers? Least common denominator. Do you remember that idea? Well, some of these aspects reduce to lower harmonics. Specifically, in the case of conjunctions, let's look at this conjunction of Sun and Neptune. Based on what I told you, here's another one, Mercury and Pluto. I didn't put a circle around it because it's not part of what I'm going to discuss in this chart, but they're also conjunct. They're 7 degrees apart, and looks like almost 8 degrees apart if I look at the exact minutes. Anyway, 7 to 8 degrees apart, we allow a 16-degree orb, so Mercury and Pluto are conjunct. Now, based on what I told you so far, which is not complete information, that means that Sun and Neptune are 1/5 or 2/5, Mercury and Pluto are 1/5 or 2/5, but I lied to you a little bit. They may actually also just be conjunct in the natal chart. So when planets are conjunct in a natal in the harmonic chart, they're in that harmonic, or they may just be conjunct in the natal chart. Let's go back to his natal chart. In fact, I've got it here in the background. I'll just click on this one in the background. Here's his natal chart, and Sun and Neptune are actually just conjunct in the natal chart. And the Mercury and Pluto, here's Mercury, whereas Pluto is over here. I can tell, because I've been doing this for so long, that they're quintile. So some of these conjunctions in the fifth harmonic are just conjunctions in the natal chart, like the Sun and Neptune, and some are actually in the harmonic. So going back to our PowerPoint, here's the problem. We don't know when we look at a conjunction in the fifth harmonic chart, we don't know if they're actually conjunct, 1/5, or 2/5. That's a limitation of harmonic charts. So harmonic charts are wonderful, but they're not perfect. They have some limitations. And how would you know? You could go back to the natal chart and look. But in the Sirius astrology software, we have a fantastic feature, which is we tell you what the aspect is in the natal chart. And it's a little hard to see because I drew a big red circle through it. But this says 0/1, which means conjunction. And so you don't have to run back to the natal chart to find out. You can see what the aspect is. And over here, it's hard to see, but it says 2/5, 2/5, 2/5, 1/5, 2/5, so you know that some of these are 2/5 and some are 1/5. It's hard to fit all these fractions in here all the time, and so sometimes you may have to go back to the natal chart to see what is what, but at least you got some idea that there's 2/5 and 1/5 going on here. All three are crowded together, so it's difficult to draw it precisely. But anyway, you've got ideas of what the aspects are right here with a feature in the Sirius software that shows that to you. Okay, but the bottom line is this. When I look at the fifth harmonic chart, what am I looking at? I'm looking for conjunctions, is the first thing I'm telling you. Obviously, I'm going to be looking at other things, because I'll explain in a minute. But I'll look for conjunctions, and when I see a conjunction, it tells me what? It tells me that the planets are either conjunct, 1/5, or 2/5 in the natal chart. That's what it tells me. Now, if you've got that, let me tell you about these other things. We don't just look at conjunctions. In the harmonic chart, we can look at other aspects. For example, notice this square. What does that mean? What does it mean that there's a square from the Venus-Jupiter-Uranus conjunction to the Sun-Neptune conjunction? Well, the interpretation is simple. You don't have to understand, You don't have to understand the technical details to appreciate this. If you see a square in the harmonic chart, it means they're squared. Square means driving, motivating, want to achieve. So to interpret it, you don't have to understand the technical details. Sun Neptune means have magic in your life, is motivating this celebration. So to celebrate, if he can celebrate and find joy and spontaneity and enthusiasm and excitability, he's driven to do that, and it's like achieving a dream. This drives him to go on stage, to do those performances, to have that charisma and electricity, and the big impact that he has. It's magic to him. And Neptune, by the way, in harmonic charts doesn't tend to all the negative things as often as in other contexts. But anyway, so you interpret it just like it says. Trines are harmonious. So you just interpret it just like you normally would, but it's all in the vibration of 5. It's telling us how he plays. Specifically, how does Buddy Holly play? He plays with exuberance, enthusiasm, excitability to achieve a dream. And there's a lot going on, which means this is an important harmonic that has a big influence over his life. And we use other aspects like these eighths, and we see Mars is involved, giving drive and ambition to this whole pattern. And notice this, lines are a little bit thinner, meaning the orb's a little weaker, but still solidly there. Mercury's involved. In future videos, I'll go through the meanings of the planets and the meanings of the pairs and how they work in harmonics. But Mercury-Mars means the desire to understand something clearly. So Sun, Mercury, Mars means that in this creativity, he wants to understand it clearly. He doesn't just rock out. He understands harmony and chord patterns. He uses much more than simple 3-chord patterns in some of his stuff. Also, the Venus-Jupiter, he introduces violins and rich sounds. And he dies very young, and I predict that if he would have lived to be older, we would see a lot more development of those ideas as well. And he's also got the excitability for rock and roll as well. And there are other harmonics that are important, and we'll discuss that in future videos on harmonics, especially particular harmonics that are important for music. And so there's even more to this. So the harmonic analysis will give us tremendous detail. Now, let me summarize. What you do is you bring up a harmonic chart, and the 5th harmonic chart, for example, will tell you how the person plays. You look for conjunctions. That will mean the planets are either conjunct or in that harmonic. In the 5th harmonic means they're 1/5 or 2/5, and those planets are playing together. If there's a square, it means the person's driven to achieve something, to do something, to overcome something, to struggle with something. Between those two planets, what does it mean to struggle to play? It sounds like an oxymoron. It sounds like it doesn't make any sense. Well, as you work with this, you begin to understand what it means. To struggle to play means you want to play. You want to work at playing. You might be involved in sports or entertainment industry. You don't just sit back on the couch and watch the movie. You want to engage with it. You want to overcome something. You want to do it. And Mars also has a lot to do with doing and achieving. When you're first learning this, mastering the vocabulary and how these things work out can take some time. But that's what the harmonic chart does. And what's really exciting about this is that I believe that this is Buddy Holly. I believe that we discovered Buddy Holly. We can look at the signs, we can look at the houses, we can look at the rulerships, but we're not going to find his infectious, funny voice where he changes tone quality and makes it thin, and then he does what's called the hiccups. The guy is a lot of fun, and we see it in this Venus, Jupiter, Uranus. We see the drive, we see the emphasis on the 5th harmonic. We even see that he's doing more than just rocking out with the Sun, Mercury, Mars. All the details are there. Now, one or two more things. If you're not into numbers and you don't like numbers and all that stuff, you don't have to get into that to do harmonic astrology. You can just analyze this harmonic chart. If you like to understand this more clearly, what's going on, I'll show that to you. So this is for people who want to understand you might say the math behind it, but you actually don't have to completely understand this to do it. You can just analyze the harmonic chart. Let me show you something. for those of you who want to understand this in more detail. I'm going to go back to his natal chart. Again, this is only for people who like to think about this. You don't have to follow what I'm going to tell you in great detail to be able to be a vibrational astrologer. Remember I told you that Venus and Jupiter are 1/5 of a circle. And Jupiter and Uranus are 2/5. And Uranus and Venus are 2/5. So they're all in this playful vibration, and Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, enthusiastic, spontaneous celebration, fun. It's like a party going on here. Okay. Now, the Sun and Neptune conjunction. The Sun and Neptune are about 18 degrees from Venus. And it's more specifically Neptune, more than the Sun. Neptune is very close to being exactly 18 degrees from Venus. It's with only a 10-minute orb. So Venus and Neptune are almost exactly 18 degrees. Who cares? What's the importance of that? Well, 18 is 1/4 of 72, isn't it? If you divide 4 into 72, you're going to get 18. And that means that 18 is 1/20th of a circle. And the meaning of that is 5 times 4. Here's an intuition behind it. Imagine the 5 is a beat. Like dong, 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 an even beat. 5 beats per circle, so dong, whatever that speed that would be. And then this is going to be 4 times faster. So for each one of these beats, there's 4 of these. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's doing 4 of these beats within each one of these 72 degrees. And whenever there's 4 beats, it creates dynamism, drive, and the desire to accomplish. So the bottom line is, you don't have to understand all of this mathematics and have all these intuitions about rhythms and beats and frequencies. All you have to know is that this is going to all be drawn for you in the harmonic chart. Because these aspects that are 20th harmonic, the meaning of 20 is 5 times 4. It's what we call factoring. You find the numbers that multiply together to equal that. The meaning is going to be a drive to play. So Sun and Neptune are in a drive to play, a need to play with the Venus, Uranus, and Jupiter. Okay? So that's a little background to it. And one more thing. Let me go back to the 5th. And one more thing, and I think we've done enough for one video. I've covered a lot of material here. One more thing. Some of these aspects reduce to lower fractions. Some will reduce to lower fractions. We've already seen that. This Sun-Neptune is actually not 5th. It's a conjunction. And some of these squares, a square in the 5th harmonic means that the planets are driven to be creative, but some of them actually reduce to a lower harmonic. And this wonderful feature in the Sirius software tells you which ones reduce to a lower harmonic. This one says 1/20th. May be difficult to see on your screen. So it really is 20. 5 times 4. Need to play. This one is 7/20th. It's a little hard to see which one is which, because all these lines are crossing each other. But even if we can't tell exactly which line this is on, we know that some of these aspects are really 20ths, and some are only 4ths. And so when they're 4ths, it means they're squares. And the squares are not specifically just creative, but they're working into this creative 5th harmonic pattern. And to go back to his natal chart, which I have in the background, that's his Sun-Neptune square Jupiter. The Sun-Neptune square Jupiter is actually tied up with a 5th harmonic pattern. They're all integrated together. And to see it, you just look at the harmonic chart. Here's the Sun-Neptune conjunction, square Jupiter, the same one he has in the natal chart, right? Here's the Sun-Neptune square Jupiter in the natal chart. He still has Sun-Neptune square Jupiter in the 5th harmonic. We're now in the 5th harmonic chart. But the orbs are 5 times bigger. Instead of it all being less than a degree orb, this Jupiter at 18 degrees is now 3 and 4 degree orbs of Sun-Neptune. It's gotten weaker, still within the 4 degree orb that we allow, I'll go over those orbs again in a moment. But there's a certain orb that we allow. It's within the orb. So those squares are reinforcing this pattern. Okay, so let me conclude this because it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. You've learned a huge amount in just a half hour. So if you're having trouble absorbing all this, don't feel bad. This is a lot of information. So let me review. What I'm saying is that planets conjunct in the fifth harmonic chart are either conjunct, as is the case with Sun Neptune, or they're fifth harmonic aspects, which means 1/5 and 2/5. In the case of Venus, Jupiter, Uranus, they all happen to be fifths. But we don't know that by looking at the harmonic chart, unless we look carefully and the program tells us what the aspect is in the natal chart. So planets that are conjunct are either in the harmonic chart are either conjunct in the natal chart or they're in that harmonic. They have that number, we're in the fifth harmonic, in the denominator. Similarly with other aspects, the squares tell us how the person wants to achieve things with their play. And they're either really 5 times 4 aspects, 20th, or some of them reduce to lower harmonics. So sometimes they reduce to lower harmonics. When I look at this Mars, it tells me it's 11/40ths. This aspect is 11/40ths. This one is 3/40ths. So it happens to be that this Mars aspecting Uranus and the Sun is all in this harmonic. None of them reduce down. And what is the meaning of that? Well, if it reduces down, it means that it's only part of the story of those planets. That he has, Buddy Holly has Sun, Neptune, square Jupiter. He wants to do big things. Jupiter and Neptune are both expansive, and Jupiter and Neptune is, exotic, always dreaming about some far-off exotic thing. That's very much the way he is, and that exotic inclination he has, Sun, Jupiter, of wanting to be going to far-off places, really gets into his creativity because it's part of this pattern. But his exotic nature, his dreamy nature, wanting to go sailing or go to tropical islands or some exotic big vision is going to take many forms, and one of them is fifth harmonic, because it's part of the fifth harmonic. And then some things here are specifically just fifth harmonic, like this joy of Venus, Jupiter, Uranus is fifth harmonic, means he wants to have a celebration, a party. Nothing too serious, nothing with too much responsibility, to break out of the box and have a good time. So it's where you're creative and playful. And this is dynamic, moving, active, so it's more inclined to music than to painting, because painting is still and quiet, and Venus, Jupiter, Uranus wants to dance around. So it's better for music and dance than it is for a quiet creative activity like arts and crafts. They will be creative, but they'll be more like Venus-Saturn kinds of things rather than Venus, Jupiter, Uranus kinds of patterns. So you can see the creativity, you can see the kind of creativity, and you can see the details that work into it. So bottom line is, you just interpret the aspects in the harmonic chart, and you will see the quality of that harmonic in the person's life. Fifth harmonic is about play, and the orbs. Let me go over the orbs to make that clear. Where do I have the orbs? Sorry, I'm jumping around here. Right there. At the bottom, we allow a 16-degree orb for conjunctions, half for oppositions, which is 8, 4 degrees for square. It comes out to a little over 5 degrees for trine, about a little over 2.5 degrees for sextile. That's the allowable orb. All of that's taken care of for you if you have software set to these orbs for you and draws the lines in. Then you can just look at the lines, and you don't have to go through lists of numbers and see. If you see a line there and the line is thin, then it means the orb, it's within orb, but the line is thin means it's weaker. And if it's big and fat and thick, then you know it's stronger. And this feature to tell you what the aspect is in the natal chart is extremely helpful to let you know what's going on. Otherwise, without that, you might for a moment think the Sun, Neptune are in fifth, that they're quintile or biquintile. They're 1/5 or 2/5. But it tells you, oh, it's 0 over 1. Then you can go back to the natal chart and go, oh, yeah, it's conjunct. And it's just nice to know. It just helps your intuition. Because the harmonic chart is really not, it really doesn't exist. It's not a real chart. It's a magnification of the natal chart so you can see what's in the natal chart. This is the only real chart, his natal chart. This harmonic chart is a way of seeing patterns in the natal chart that otherwise are difficult to see. It like blows it up, expands it around, so you can see those intricate patterns that otherwise we cannot see. Okay, we're at almost 36 minutes. We've covered a lot of material, and if you need to watch this video another time or another few times, go ahead and do it, because if you understand everything that I've presented in this video, you really have a very clear and fairly sophisticated and deep understanding of what harmonic charts are all about and why we use them in vibrational astrology, or harmonic astrology, whatever you want to call it, whatever style of minor aspects you're doing. You understand what it's all about. And I'll talk about other things. You probably have a million questions on your mind. Do you use signs? Do you use houses? I'll get to all that. We're just going to take one step at a time. And as we get into this, I can almost guarantee you're going to be amazed. We will see in great detail what people are like. This is just the first half hour of looking into this stuff. We now, at this point, we've been working on this for decades, and over the last several years, we've got a group of people practicing vibrational astrology, researching vibrational astrology. Every few months, it seems, we get deeper and deeper insight into the details of exactly what gives people different talents and abilities and so on, and how we can forecast with this stuff, etc. Okay, so enough for one video. I will continue this, and we'll understand this better and better and better. Again, if you need to, just watch this video a few times, and it'll gradually sink in. And as we continue with the additional parts to this, the series of these videos on harmonic charts, it'll become clearer and clearer. Okay, thank you very much, my friends, for listening. God bless. Namaste.